So let me ask you a question. Do you think ignorance is toxic?
If you determine to be ignorant, if it's willful, yeah.
Well, then
Yeah,
that's not
that's what I
ignorance.
was gonna
That's
say. It
stupidity.
can be. Ignorance can be toxic.
No, but if you're saying
I
that you
don't
have a
agree at
willingness
all.
to be ignorant, that means that you're willingly choosing to be stupid. Because to choose to be ignorant, that means you know full well. To truly be ignorant means you have no clue. Just like I don't know what I don't know, so that's me truly being ignorant. But if you make a willing decision, it's like, hey, I would rather just not know, and I want to feign ignorance, or I just want to continue to just not do more or learn more, that's a very different conversation than you just actually being ignorant.
So you
I
don't
agree
think
with that.
ignorance can breed toxicity? Because I'm just thinking about just on low key, like if let's say you're young and you're dating, of course you're going to be ignorant to some things in life, right? Because you just haven't had enough life experience. I think that ignorance sometimes is what lead people into bad relationships going forward because there's a level of ignorance. So that ignorance can breed toxicity because you end up with a person that's toxic and now that's in you and then you end up going into a relationship doing that same thing. Now I'm not saying it's intentional, but it is toxic nonetheless.
But I mean, ignorance works both ways. Like if you're ignorant of, the bad things of relationships, right? And you find a good person by the grace of God, and you go on through life, just like when you talk about how, hey, why don't more people talk about the positives of marriage, right? Why don't more people talk about that? If I only heard about the positives of marriage, right, and I'm ignorant to the bad things in the marriage, then I can walk into this relationship only thinking about the positives more so than the negatives, and I'm more inclined to want to find the positives instead of the negatives. But whether you are ignorant of the positives or ignorant of the narratives of the negatives, I don't think that necessarily means that you're toxic or that ignorance is toxic. I just think ignorance is just ignorance.
So I hear what you're saying. I'm just having a hard time accepting it only because we live in the age of information where the entire knowledge that has been accumulated over the entirety of humanity is at our fingertips, right? And so, at, with that, ignorance is always a choice at this point because you have so much access to so much information to things that are outside of your immediate vicinity. Ignorance is actually a choice because the moment that you're even exposed to the slightest chance of a possibility of something, you can go look it up, right? But then to the point of like the toxicity, whether you realize that that toxicity exists out of ignorance, out of life experiences, or whatever it is, or whether you don't acknowledge that exists, it's still toxic. There are toxic chemicals that we can't see that we have to buy little machines that let us know exist around us, right? Because we don't have that perception that it's there, right? Sorry, Shannon, about the carbon monoxide detector, right? Like those types of tools are there to show us when toxicity exists when we're not able to identify it on our own. It doesn't mean that it's not there. And I think that happens in interpersonal relationships as well, romantic and otherwise, that if you are ignorant, you leave yourself susceptible to toxicity, and in fact, it can become a breeding ground for toxicity. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yep.
I think that's a very valid point. My counter is that a tool is only as good as a person who knows how to use a tool. There's some people that have a little bit more skill with understanding how to use the tool of the internet a little bit better than others. And that also, because of this internet that we have, right? That people that are like, as we were talking earlier, there's some people that are smarter that control this internet and that have the abilities to create a narrative and idea. And if you're not smart enough at how to properly craft the tool that you have in front of you, you may not be able to understand or even get to the information that you're talking about as far as like the toxic behavior that you have because of the people who are a lot smarter than you, who made this tool, who know how to use this tool to keep you from being able to do some of the things that you claim they should be able to do.
That is a fact, Chavo.
I agree, Chavo. Hey, what about internal moral compasses? Do you think those exist, HD? Because if we
Oh, I definitely think they most certainly exist, but most of the time people will have the answer in themselves and choose to go in the opposite direction.
then that's not ignorance. That's willfully choosing.
Yeah, but I'm talking about when they clearly have no idea. They didn't hear no internal monologue. They ain't hear nothing. They literally was just like they're like a deer in headlights. They crossing the street. They don't see this car 10 miles down the street that's about to come at 100 miles per hour. They don't see that because they just walking on the street, living their best life.
But I, I can understand an initial. So if you afforded a mistake, then I wouldn't say, that. So what I'm talking about is you've seen the results of it and you're still maintaining this behavior. Like if you go someplace and you act a fool and you see the results of it, right? And then you go back and continue to act the fool. Even though nobody taught you to act a different way, you're still behaving ignorantly by choice. So like using that example, it's still a choice after like I give you the initial one where you make the mistake, the learning curve. After that point, everything is intentional, is what I'm saying.
I agree.
Okay.
So I I actually agree with HD on his point. So can we all agree that most people believe that they're good people, correct? Can we agree to that? If we agree to that and someone displays toxic behavior, but that person believes that they're a good person, how do they know that they're displaying toxic behavior if they believe that they are a good person? That's the ignorance he's talking about. You don't know what you don't know. It was never your fault. It's somebody else's fault. You were in the right.
But kind of using Inaz's example is that even when, let's say, you yourself may not be aware of the toxic chemicals, right? There are things around you that could alert that it's toxic. So in that situation, I believe that even if you think you're a good person, the people who you are around or don't want to be around you is kind of like that thing that be beeping in Shan's house all the time, right? So I
Is
think
this
that
still beeping?
no.
We don't know now, but it probably is.